This is the third entry in a series of reviews I've written discussing my thoughts on the Game Awards nominees for Game of the Year in 2020. There isn't a predetermined order for the reviews in this series, but they were produced with the intention to be watched as a whole. I've personally completed all of the nominees on my own time, and for full context, I recommend you play through them as well before watching this review. The most significant point I can make out of my time with Ghosts of Tsushima is that games have gotten really pretty. I don't think that's a bad takeaway, because it seems to me from the promotional material to the game itself that this was always Sucker Punch's priority during development. Like the Japanese films the game loudly touts as its source material, Sucker Punch wanted to treat their players to a foremost visual experience. To that end, I'd call their game a success, though unfortunately that intention might have been ill-placed, since to me on almost every other level, the game either just sits alongside its peers or falls flat on its face. The bulk of your time in Tsushima will be either spent exploring or in combat, the two areas that pose the largest hurdles for any open world game to face in the utterly saturated market this generation. For example, at least 3 different open world RPGs were released by Ubisoft in 2020 alone: Watch Dogs Legion, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and Immortals: Phoenix Rising. While exploration itself has seemed to rise in quality since the monolithic example set in 2017 by Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, combat seems to be stuck in the early 2010s, either picking the route of the Dark Souls light, focusing on stamina management and mastering parry timing, or the group-based counter combos and gadgetry made by the Batman Arkham trilogy. Tsushima somehow opts to do both of these things, while in most gameplay getting a passing grade for its Arkham-like ninja samurai combat, but moving in the camera and restricting your moveset to parries, dodges, and attacks for its cinematic one-on-one duels. While this decision not only kneecaps your options in a major way for dealing with the most deadly enemies in the game, it also pulls the curtain back on how bare the combat is underneath Jin's tool belt. I completely understand throwing bombs and kunai at your dueling opponent would shatter the image of the Kurosawa-esque samurai showdown they were aiming for, but if you ask me, the chance of them capturing any of that specific energy went out the window the moment they decided their game was going to be an open-world action RPG. Fighting one-on-one removes any reliances on the stance-changing system you would have had because your enemy isn't ever going to pull out an alternate weapon, and when you don't react to the prompts and telegraphs exactly as they come, the opponents tend to turn into awful-looking glitchy messes that slide across the floor magnetized in your direction. This can happen in even the best of Souls games, but I've never seen it crop up quite to the degree that I have in the boss encounters in this game. When it comes to exploration, the game fares a bit better, though not by much. The most novel aspect when it comes to this game's exploration system is a new guiding wind mechanic, with which the player can signal a gust of wind to blow in the direction of their chosen objective. At first, this idea seems pretty fresh. I'd long since grown tired of the industry standard of compass or minimap guided exploration. You'd expect something like the wind as an element of the game would be far more immersive, but in practice I found myself stumbling around for a while once I'd reached my terminus, because as it turns out, the wind isn't particularly useful in helping you find a specific person in a heavily wooded or crowded civilian area. I can also recall several unfortunate instances of having to forego the optional shrine or fox den areas I'd find due to a preoccupation with a quest or a battle. Having a bird fluttering around and tweeting constantly at you to direct you into the woods isn't the most pleasant sight when you're surrounded on all sides by combatants. I've avoided mentioning the story in this review until this point because it's really the nail in the coffin for me on this whole project. Put in the most simple terms, Ghosts of Tsushima tells the story of a samurai lord's heir who strays from his Bushido teachings in order to save his homeland from a Mongolian invasion, but at the cost of his honor. On the face of it, there wouldn't be much wrong with a story like this. Perhaps maybe, just by now, the common use of honor as a driving force in a story about Japanese culture or history from the foreign perspective looking in. Sucker Punch, however, has gone even further in how much their game demonizes the protagonist's Mongolian adversaries, even beyond the scenes of Koden Khan, the story's antagonist, monologuing with the overwrought villain platitudes, "You and I are not so different," at Jin while he considers his dedication to the Bushido Code. Tsushima takes every opportunity to other the Mongolians it features, depicting them all as deceitful, slovenly, and at times outright calling them savages. The knee-jerk reaction here would be to say that this treatment is simply because they're at war, but positioning your characters as above their adversaries in a conflict because they follow the Bushido Code is itself simply a backwards assertion. Looking back at what I've written here, it seems that I've been a bit hard on this game. I'd liken the situation to a kind of death by 1,000 cuts, because this game makes an incredible first impression. From the moment you start, this game's strength becomes apparent with its incredibly striking visual beach battle scene, this last stand of Tsushima's samurai against an oncoming invasion. The momentum driven by my fascination with the game's visuals was enough to carry me through the first act of the game, where I spent most of my time just exploring and doing many side quests. I genuinely enjoyed that stint with the game, but I don't think it was enough to really save the whole product for me, not by the end. This game was just the most passable title I've played in a long time, but with some really great effort put into its visuals. I think that simply appreciating the visuals in a game sometimes can be a bad look. Obviously, it's better if your game is more well-rounded as a piece of media, but sometimes all we remember about a game is its visuals, and it's enough to make it work. I want to feel like I've made some of those memories with this game, but the rest of what's there just leaves me with a concerning feeling that it won't be enough to differentiate itself in the end.